All right, it's Alan Boyle from Saltwater. We are live at 5. This is the first LinkedIn Live I've actually done in about a year, so I'm probably going to be a little bit rusty here. But today we're chatting to an amazing software engineer and entrepreneur, Marek Dopiera. I'll going to go into a couple of questions now and just we'll get into why he started his business, Unoperate. And I'm quite interested in the name Unoperate, considering that I do all things operational. So we'll get into that. But just very quickly, in terms of a bio, Marek is a software engineer turned entrepreneur. He founded and runs Unoperate, a consulting specializing in making software reliable, scalable, and efficient. Unoperate helps its customers by implementing good software engineering practices and, more importantly, developing the people structures to enable efficient software delivery. Before Unoperate, he took part in developing and maintaining distributed storage systems and databases. The culmination of his coding career was his tech leadership role and of the team supporting Google's Bigtable, probably the world's largest database service. So we're going to get into it. Marek, welcome. You're in Warsaw, I believe, so you're probably an hour ahead. So you're not live at 5, you're live at 6. And I think there are a number of people actually registered for this LinkedIn Live. I'm sure a few people will drop in and drop out, but I'm just welcoming and inviting people to add some comments or questions as we go along. We'll probably be on for about half an hour. We might go on a little bit longer. But if you do want to ask a couple of questions or say hi, and please do, if I can fit you in or fit the questions in, we will. If not, we'll get back to you after the show. So let's get into it. Marek, tell me, Unoperate. Firstly, you dropped out of Google. You've done a couple of things since. Why Unoperate? And tell me about the name and why you started it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Allan. So yeah, indeed, I used to work. I'm a software engineer by heart and by education practice as well. So I love creating good software, and I did that. Eventually, I ended up in Google doing their Bigtable, as you said. That was a lot of fun. That was a great experience, great people around me. But I figured out I'm going to have a little bit more satisfaction out of my life if I try to do something on my own outside of a huge corporation where, everything is prepared for you, where you know what you need to do, when you know how to fit into the organization scheme. So I figured, let me try to do something on my own. And to be perfectly honest, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing at first. Not that I do now, but a little bit less so, I hope. So initially, my idea was to spread the word of what SRE is. So because back in 2018, when I quit, not many people actually knew what it was. So I decided to start a consultancy around that. Initially, I was doing it on my own. But I soon learned that this was not a very good idea, because explaining to people what site reliability is probably going to take more effort than actually than feasible in order to sell anything. However, this did result in some great experiences. For example, that's how I started helping a company called Codility. Which was, initially I was there in order to help them with their infrastructure, but I ended up doing interim VP engineering over there because one thing led to another, and that's how I ended up there. And that was great, because what I learned over there is that coding and infrastructure and practices and software, this is all great, but you can have much more impact on companies if you help them on I would say, via a broader package, not only the expertise, but also helping to build stuff wherever it is needed and build the people structures around it. So I started Unoperate. I already had the name by then, and the name, that was one of the SRE principles. Humans make more mistakes than machines do, so humans shouldn't be operating machines. So rather than that, they should be operating on their own, hence Unoperate. So that's it.
Okay, that's interesting. So SRE, or site reliability engineering, pretty much comes from the Google playbook. They wrote the book there. So yeah, interesting. I've come across it, and a lot of the times, I suppose, with DevOps and engineering, we talk about we want the engineers not just to build it and ship it, but build it and maintain it. And I think that's where the reliability piece comes in. So interesting. Okay.
I'd say it's a little bit broader, as in, that's this is one of the things that I'm trying companies to understand, trying to help companies understand. You need to engineer for reliability from the start. You cannot, if you're first building the product and then you figure out, okay, now it's time for me to run it and make it reliable, you're probably going to have a hard time. So usually it's best to start thinking from day one. That's my take on it.
Okay. Just explain the day one thinking to me. Just give me a bit of example.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you need to really ask yourself the questions of what reliability means to you, because obviously this is gonna have a completely different meaning when you're running a bank or you're creating a bank, and when you're creating a website to find the nearest vet in your town, right? Obviously, it's going to be a poor experience for somebody not to be able to find a vet for 2 minutes if the site is down, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So what you really need to do is start thinking about what your reliability means and operationalizing it, right? So you need to define metrics, and those metrics should guide you while you're designing the software and while you're designing the procedures that you build in your team in order to make it reliable, right? Because the software is one thing, you need to design it in a specific way, and I'd love to dive deep if there's going to be interest in what that actually means, but I think I should abstract away from this at this point. But also, you need to make sure that the team acts in a way that that the software that you're building is possible to be maintained in a reliable way. Let me give you an example. If you experience a failure, the worst thing you can do is start doing a blame game. The proper thing you need to do is try to learn from it. So you need to make sure, you need to build it into the team's culture so that this is their natural reaction. If something happens, they need to learn from it. If something happens, they need to understand what consequences it had. That's why you need those quality metrics or reliability metrics. And you need to anticipate. You need to know what scale you're going to be at some point in the future and whatnot. So this stuff, I don't think you can retrofit. I think you need that from day one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And again, sort of being I suppose ex-Amazon, they all talk about day one thinking as well. They say it's always day one. So you need to be building as if it's the first day you're doing it, and you need to be thinking around all the elements. I like what you said about understanding and learning from the problems and from how you build. And it goes back to one of the mechanisms that I like to use in my business with customers is the root cause analysis, or the 5 why analysis. So again, were you looking at specifically understanding what potential consequences are? I'm quite interested in the other side of that, as well as understanding what the root cause is, so that people can learn from that without, as you said, the blame game. You don't want to have that blame game, but you want to know what the root cause is so that you can take a path to green, I suppose, or a path to good action.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And if you read anything about the reliability, one of the things that is one of the core manifestations of this principle is writing postmortems, right? So whenever there is a disaster or even an outage, you start doing a postmortem. That's a standard kind of document that sort of structures your thinking. So you try to really understand all the causes, as you said, and most importantly, how you can fix them. But that's exactly what you said. I don't think that those same principles differ that much from one field of expertise to another, right?
Exactly. And again, I'm not professing to be a software engineer here. So when I looked in the bookstore and saw the big SRE Google manual, which is about that thick, I chose not to read it, right? But I do understand some of the principles, and it's great to see those practices coming into the work you do. So tell me, I mean, I suppose just a couple of questions from my side is, how do you make sure that a software project is a success? I mean, I know you've talked about this day one thinking, but you're engaging with a new client and you're about to get started. What are the success criteria you think about early on?
Right. So the first thing that I really want to nail down is to make sure that we really have a common understanding of what our real goal is, right? Because if you go to if you start a project, let it be, I don't know, LLM querying a database, right? Whatever. Then you can tell it, okay, that's my end goal. That's what I want to do. I don't want to write SQL expressions anymore. I just want to express something in a natural language and let it do the querying for me. And that's a great starting point. But if you really want to understand what that means, you need to go much deeper. And that, I think, there's no way around it, because if you do not really get to the nitty-gritty details, I bet that every single one person that you're going to talk to about such an ambiguous goal is going to have an absolutely different idea of what that means. So then you really want to do that. And more than that, you want to anticipate your further direction of that thing, right? So is it going to be, well, different variants of SQL or whatever, different languages. But then you also need to really have a pretty good understanding of how you want to build it. And I know there's going to be people who are going to tell me, well, look, if you're starting from defining your product in such a detailed way, and then creating a grand design, well, that's an anti-pattern because you're doing waterfall and whatnot. And obviously there is a point at which you should cut off and stop doing that. But if you do not do it, and if you do not make any decision explicit, well, for sure you're not going to make the one implicitly. So at least you're going to have something to change rather than not having anything. And then, once you have that, you can start building, but make sure that you're going to start building something not bottom up, but something top down, something that is going to be as quickly usable in a critical path as possible, and only then fill the gaps that you left behind, just to make sure that to validate your ideas and whatnot. And then there is obviously the human part around it, right? You really need a team. It's not going to be built by robots. So you need to structure the team in a way that is going to, first of all, allow themselves to make conscious decisions in an independent way from decision makers elsewhere, so that they are not those robots implementing features that somebody told them are important. They need to understand the goal, and they need to implement what is really important, and they need to do it in a structured way. Depending obviously on the scale of the project, the structure is completely different. So this is I don't think there is a silver bullet here, but again, obviously not doing anything is unlikely to be better than doing something. But then again, I think the final word is pragmatism. I think that all those rules and all those textbooks and everything, I think you really need to treat them with a grain of salt, because if you take them at face value, you're just going to be a fanatic of something rather than wanting to solve a problem, right?
Yeah, no, look, that's a really good point. And I think as you've been speaking, a few questions have bubbled up. If anyone wants to post some comments in LinkedIn, I'm just seeing right now that I'm using StreamYard, and within StreamYard, I've just got a little message saying I can't post comments to LinkedIn. So I've obviously not set up something, or I've broken something along the way. But if people are posting comments, I'm not seeing them, and apologies. We will get back to any comments or questions on LinkedIn after this if they don't come through. But do say hi or hello, and I'll see if it actually is working or not, but that's fine. But some of the questions that are bubbling up, Marek, are obviously the end goal is important, right? So you want to have that output. You want to know what you're building for, what you're solving for, and you want to get the engineers aligned around that. But you spoke about getting into the minute details. You don't want to overanalyze that, because otherwise you're spending way too much time analyzing that. The other thing you spoke about was, you mentioned waterfall. Obviously, the opposite to a waterfall project is agile, and understanding which project to tackle when. But also, and this is probably another question, it's a double-barreled question, is agile better than waterfall? Is waterfall better than agile? Which projects suit each other? But also, when you start bringing your engineering team together, particularly when you're hiring from outside, and you have engineers that have certain preferences, how do you manage that relationship between the engineers that like to sort of build, break, experiment, and other engineers that need to have a proper project plan in place?
So let me try to start with the first question, which is the waterfall versus the agile. Which one would you put in place, and where is the cutoff point for deciding for the for the designing. I think the general rule that differentiates between let me start over. The key thing I think that Agile gives you is a structured way to reacting to changing circumstances. So, and that's great, because if you're building a product, those are going to change pretty quickly and pretty often, and that's something I bet that all of us in this virtual room know. So then there is no way you're going to design all of these changes up front, because, well, that wouldn't be a change anymore. So you don't really have a choice there. However, if you have a well-scoped problem, I think avoiding doing an upfront design and avoiding giving a thought upfront and just looking for the solution without a clear plan, I think that's just a suboptimal way of doing this. So if there is a very specific task, let's say, I don't know, build this integration with something. Well, you just need to learn the data model that you have, the one that is there, and try to come up with all the requirements that you need and just go and implement it. There is no reason for you to perform such a task in an agile manner. And where's the cutoff point? I don't think there is a silver bullet. So I don't think I have a universal answer for this, obviously. But then you asked, how do you? Let me try to repeat the question, and please let me know if I got it wrong. How do you make sure that the software engineers who are very organized and require a plan get to work with those who want to work in an agile way, right?
Yeah, that's exactly that.
Yeah. So, well, we're all adults, right? So I think that every team dynamic is different, and obviously there is going to be some tensions, especially at the beginning when the team is formed. So then there is this wordplay that I really hate, but this has some truth to it. This forming, storming, performing, whatever. So obviously, I don't think you're going to be able to avoid that, but I think it's a good thing. As in, they should complement each other, right? The more organized people should press the less organized people to become more organized, and vice versa. And that's how the compromise is built. And I don't think there is a software engineer type that is going to be the best. I think that you exactly need that kind of a blend. I would be worried if everybody was on the same page from day one.
Yeah, no, it's a great response. And I'll tell you just two quick anecdotes. One lesson I learned as a leader in the tech space with an engineering software team was I came in trying to solve the problem. So I had a number of engineers in a room that are designed and built to solve problems. And then I come in as a leader saying, hey, we've got this issue. What about this solution? What about this solution? What about this solution? And I ended up, to be quite honest, pissing off all the engineers, right? And it was a huge lesson on my side to realize, hang on, create the space, let the engineers figure out the problem. And I think that was quite an interesting lesson and learning for me. And then I think the other thing that I bring in, and it's a tool, it's something that I picked up in the Amazon days as well, but separate to the values, introducing some first principles for the team. So if you're putting a team together, having first principles in place that whether you're organized in a waterfall type way or agile, you are all centered around some first principles that you all buy into. So you can bring your different blended approaches into a project, but you're developing around a set of first principles. I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on that.
Oh yeah, totally agreed. And that is interesting how often it pops up, right? And it pops up in very down-to-earth choices even. Do we make it right? Do we make it fast? Do we make it pragmatic? Or do we optimize for today? Do we optimize for tomorrow? Or are we just doing a POC, so who cares? And I think, I think you're exactly right. And creating that kind of a culture, well, I'm not an expert on building this in a conscious way, but I think that it has to be built.
Yeah. Just want to move over to another question just around, you've obviously, having worked in a number of projects, before starting your own business, and maybe one or two war stories along the way during the business, but projects that fail and why. Like, I mean, what are the kind of the red flags people should look out for? What have you seen in the past that you could sort of advise the audience today to be aware of, particularly the people that are in the same boat where they're delivering projects?
Yeah, let me think which one well, I cannot share all the projects or the project
No, of
specific.
course.
However, I do have. Hopefully, nobody recognizes this, but I do have one on my mind. The team started solving a project basing on the premise that this is going to be a perfect way of learning a new technology. And they didn't notice the technology that they chose was an absolute overkill. They blocked half of the company for a really long time because the project was crucial for other teams, and the project failed because, well, if something drags on for too long, that is a failure. So the project took way more than it should have, just because somebody made the decision, we're just going to start from the tech and we're going to learn the tech on the way. Should be exactly the other way around, right? But this is a technical thing. You'd be surprised how often I've seen a project failed because nobody knew what the project was. If you ask people around, everybody had a different idea of what the goal is. And I tried to stress this at the beginning, and I've seen this many times. I know it sounds ridiculous, right? I know what I want, and then it turns out, no, you really didn't. You only thought you knew. And I've seen those fall in a pretty dramatic way.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, and I'm sure everybody has seen that image that gets sent around the internet of the customer wants the swing on the tree, and then how it all ends up at the very end in terms of what was actually developed. So, and that's super important. But and it's being able to bridge that gap between what the customer wants and get them to articulate. It's difficult, and even if they wireframe something, or they draw the report, or they draw what the dashboard looks like that they want at the end of the day, it allows you to work backwards from that and at least figure out, okay, and collectively come up with a definition for what the project is. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at it from different perspectives, and I think this might be particularly not obvious to people coming from a similar background as myself, because when you're a software engineer, you're starting at the bottom of the ladder usually, and that means you get your own well-defined scope, you get your own well-defined task, you get your own well-defined piece of responsibility, and as you grow, you get more and more of it. So it might seem natural for you to know that you know what you're doing, but what you really observe is your manager knowing what they're doing, because they're giving you a larger and larger piece of responsibility when you're ready for it. But once you step out and look at it from the outside, then you see disasters happening.
Yeah, no, that's it's interesting that what you say about it. The onboarding is just super important of those of engineers within a team, managing expectations from the outset. I think they're gone are the days where a new engineer gets thrown in to say, right, you're just fixing tickets and you're just fixing bugs until you learn the code. Maybe it's still happening. I'm hoping it's not, but I'm hoping that there's more thought being put in by teams to onboard engineers and saying, right, you're going to be delivering this function, but here's the broader context. Here's why we're doing it. And 6 months from now, if you get to certain points of delivery, you'll be exposed to more parts of the software or different elements. So I think that kind of brings me in a little bit to the next question. I mean, when you work with teams, you're obviously bringing your team in to augment an existing team. So you're probably working with a CTO or an existing team that's in place at a customer. And either you're bringing your team or your thinking into an existing team, or else the pure outsource team. How do you get that relationship right between yourselves and your customers?
So yeah, that's For what it's worth, we've had different types of arrangements, and those different types of arrangements were, well, dictated by what we thought was right, what the customers thought was right, what the customer needed, what we thought was what we needed. So obviously the approaches were absolutely different. However, I think there is a common denominator across all of them. And that common denominator, I think, first thing is you really need to build trust, and because if you don't build the trust, this is not going to work. And what's the best way of building trust? Full transparency, right? And by meaning full transparency, I'm saying, here's what I want to do, here's what I achieved so far, here's what went wrong, here's what went right. And I know that this might be surprising to some people that try this for the first time, but it pays off so quickly. It pays off so quickly. I tried, I screwed up, but that's that was expected. We know that we're going to screw up here and there, but the reason why we're so transparent is because we want you to know, and because we want you to know that this is how you're avoiding the big screw ups. So that's one. The other one is you really need to be you need to be razor sharp, precise about what you want to do and how you want to do it, and you need to over communicate this to a, I would say, comical level, right? Because you want to take notes, you want to speak about this multiple times, and you really want to make sure that everybody in the room has the same understanding of what is going on, because otherwise there are going to be misunderstandings. And this is, as I said, one of the big things, the big reasons for mess ups that I've seen, people solving the wrong goals. So this is the way of avoiding this. So you really need to do this. Other than that, I think that's pretty much what I said before. You really need to make sure that the end goal is known to everybody. The responsibilities are known, and this is a sort of this is something that I learned the hard way. The responsibilities, that's a two-way street. It's not that there is a company that is ordering services and there is a company that is delivering the service. This has to work both ways, because you're gonna need the customer to do some things for you. The customer is gonna have to, well, first of all, and just be able to give you input, or then just verify if what you're doing is of the quality that they expected, or be able to adjust their software to integrate with what you're doing. And that's something you also want to make super explicit and embedded in the day-to-day process. I don't know if that makes sense, or you expected a different kind of answer.
No, it makes total sense. And again, when I hear about how you work with internal teams, external teams, it's exactly the same as how an internal team should work anyway. And a lot of what I do in terms of, I think, aligning operations or integrating the various different functions of the business, I suppose that's the role of the COO. But certainly when I go and look at businesses and try and implement business operating systems that make them scale well or efficiently, it's exactly what you've been saying. It's understand the goal, the big goal, where you want to go, the North Star, whatever you want to call it, and over communicate. I mean, what you said there, be comical almost about over communicating. And I know sometimes, like when you work with companies and they talk about their values regularly, sometimes people in the company roll their eyes. But if they're rolling their eyes, you know it's working. They're saying, oh, there goes the software engineering manager going off about the first principles again. But yeah, and interesting. I mean, I've just finished a few months ago Musk's book, and Elon Musk book, and love him or hate him, he's a controversial character, right? But he talks about his first principles very often. One of them around manufacturing, making sure that you're always looking for efficiencies and you're always looking for cost savings. And he's comical about it, and he really drills this into the team. So it's quite interesting to hear about that, and holding your customer accountable as well, saying, look, if we're going to deliver this shared goal together, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page all the time. Another mechanism I use with meetings, when I bring multiple teams together for a meeting, I'll start the meeting with a preamble. And every time I start the meeting, I'll say, we're at this meeting because our goal this quarter is to do X. And by the way, here are our first principles or our values or our tenets or whatever you want to call it. And then we get into the meeting. So there's almost like a 1-minute preamble before every meeting goes. And yes, engineers and people will roll their eyes and go, here we go again. But it only takes a minute. And it just gets everybody centered on the same page so that you have that successful meeting.
Can I have a question to you?
Sure.
To form it a little bit. When you're speaking to the teams that you're working with to make sure that their goals are delivered, how different are engineers from the rest of the organizations in terms of what kind of problems are obvious to the what kind of techniques or what kind of work ethics are obvious to the developers, and which are the complete opposite?
I think developers know in their, and again, I want to generalize here. I'm not sure how many people on the calls. I know one person said hi, and I'm sure maybe a question or two will come in. We are getting to the end of the call, so I don't want to keep you for too long. But I think, and again, without generalizing, developers have a good way of solving problems themselves. And I think sometimes engineers can be intolerant to the stupid questions, right? So if you've got a business user coming in, or maybe somebody from customer support asking a question, the developer might be intolerant to that question. And they know in their head how the thing works, but they haven't actually understood the context. And sometimes that teaching, understanding and knowing something versus being able to teach that to a non-technical person is tricky. So in meetings, sometimes I find there is a challenge between the non-technical. And you see this in scale-ups. Scale-ups generally are born, mainly tech scale-ups, where it's a technical team building a product, getting product market fit. And then when they move through the various series and fundraising rounds, that product will get a bit of traction. And the first thing they do with the seed money or the Series A or the next level of funding that comes in, they go and hire salespeople. Now, the salespeople are in different regions, different territories. They want very good documented understanding of how the product works. The engineering folks may not have necessarily done that. They've built it, they know how it works, they can support it, but they haven't necessarily explained it to non-technical people in order to how to sell it. So there's always a little bit of friction between tech engineering and maybe sales or marketing, as those teams, as you said earlier, they start storming and forming, and I think typically the engineer has this, I will build it, I will fix it, I'll maintain it, we don't need to know what's under the hood, whereas everybody else needs more context that they can articulate to the customers. I hope that answers the question.
It does, and for better or worse, it actually confirms my observations. We as engineers do have some advantages, but we do have some disadvantages as well. The key thing is to be aware of them, right?
I've got a couple more questions before we go. I know we've just hit 30 minutes or whatever, and if any questions do come in, we'll hopefully answer them quickly. But I don't want to keep you too long, Marek. But obviously, it's all about scaling properly and making sure that we can scale these projects. So I suppose what does it take from your side, apart from the people processes, to develop reliable, scalable software? If you had a quick answer to that, I think that would be one thing. And then another question, final question, which if you want to add that in, is your movement, your transition from a engineer to a CEO, effectively, because you're building this agency. What have been one or two of your learnings along the way?
So let me start with the thing I feel more comfortable with. So let me stick to scaling, and then I'll move on to the trickier question. Perhaps some thoughts come to my mind in the meantime. I think what you need to start with is the same thing as we spoken before, which is you need to start with with the end goal, which is what kind of reliability, what kind of scalability you want, and what that really is. But then you cannot stop there. Obviously, you need mature engineering practices. So what do I mean by mature engineering practices? For the design of the service that you're doing has to scale in at least two ways. One, complexity wise, and the other, user base wise, or whatever your in computational power driving scalability factor is. So complexity wise, this I've seen more often to be the limiting factor rather than the other one. And that really boils down to a couple of really simple rules of thumb, which is, well, first of all, there's this NIH syndrome, not invented here. you really need to ditch that. You're really not going to have the time to spend on every single bit you're going to be doing that others who specialize in that field did. So you really want to use whatever is ready. And the other one is, well, the flip side of that coin is there is this other acronym that I'm going to have trouble pronouncing, but it boils down to you ain't going to need it. You really need to stick to only what you actually need, because otherwise your software is going to be bloated and it's going to be slowing down. Then you want to, in general, you want to keep interfaces small, keep everything as simple as possible. Use patterns. What they teach you at high school, at computer science schools, and user-wise, it's pretty much the same. Use managed solutions. Use everything what is out there ready for you, waiting. Just only when you really want to spend effort on something, make sure that this is actually when you're building an engineering advantage over something else. Do not use anything that somebody did for you. It's usually not gonna pay off. No one zone concurrent algorithms, no one zone security algorithms. Just don't go there. Use ready stuff. And then watch out for tech debt. I don't know if that answers it. Obviously, there is much more to it, but we're over time. So I'll allow myself to stop that and switch to the trickier question that you asked.
Yeah. No, I think firstly, just very quickly, the scaling well principle of less is more. I love that. And it's great to hear that's a huge piece of what simplifying, getting rid of the debt, but always be eliminating, always be trying to reduce, because that actually optimizes your product and allows it to live longer. So, sorry, I interrupted you.
Absolutely, and I think I'm really happy that you're stressing that. I think that this is, if there's one thing about what our listeners need to remember about scalability is exactly what you said. Less is more. Just keep it simple. So I'd sign off on that. And right, and the trick question is, well, the first learning was how stupid I was when I started my own company, because I really thought it's going to be way easier than it actually is. Because, well, there is this kind of pride that many developers or engineers share that, well, we're solving all those complex problems. So how hard can sales be? How hard can marketing be? How hard organizing people can be? Well, guess what? It's pretty damn hard. And so I guess I was too proud and too ignorant to realize that. And once I started doing this, I learned, holy crap, there's so much to learn, and I'm learning now, and hopefully quickly enough to be able to grow the business. But I think this is the biggest lesson that I've learned. Business is well, even in engineering business, the engineering bit is only a small piece of it.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I've worked in sales, I've worked in different areas, and even as a small business owner now and working with various clients, it's getting the balance right. The people side, the delivery versus the sales, and we're coming up to time. So I've seen no questions here, which either means one thing: lots of engineers on the call and no salespeople. But I think, or else people are holding back their questions. So what I'd recommend is anybody on the call, if you're connected to me, please connect with Marek. If otherwise, just connect into me. Ask us questions. Get back to us. I'm sure, once we connected on LinkedIn, you can send a message saying, "Hey, listen, this is what I picked up. Here's a question." We'll be happy to answer your questions. I really recommend learning a little bit more about Unoperate and what they do. And also, if you're a CTO on this call, or you're a business owner looking to build or looking to solve complex problems, consider chatting to the folks out at Unoperate. Some great learnings today. Marek, I really appreciate your time. And again, look forward to chatting again soon.
Likewise, thank you very much. And it's amazing to me that we only just met, and even though you're fixing companies at a different level, there are so many shared principles that we apply to our customers. So this is amazing. Hopefully, Absolutely. That means that we're both right rather than both wrong.
Hopefully, we've just validated each other, which is fantastic. All right, I'm going to end that. Thanks to everybody that joined, and please, as I said, connect, ask us questions, reach out. The usual stuff that happens on LinkedIn. Take it easy.
Yeah, thank you, Allan. Thank you, everybody.
Ciao.